Okay, so yeah, I think we are all people are in almost. So I would say thank you for being with us on this lovely November 18th, 2021. This live session is hosted by two of our finest industry specialists, Germany-based Manuel Neukum, who is our COO at EvidentIQ, and our UK-based Director of Solutions Consulting, Simon Taylor. So both welcome. So to introduce myself, I'm Thierry Hillerer. I'm the product marketing lead at EvidentIQ, and I'll be your master of ceremonies today. In today's presentation, we will cover how EvidentIQ's eConsent improves trial participants' experience by meeting them when they are. The presentation is twofold. The first part will be more around how eConsent improves the quality and efficiency of the patient consent collection, and how we at EvidentIQ are looking at this. And secondly, we will show you how this works in our dummy demo environment. So that's it a bit in a nutshell. Some additional session logistics. You can play this webcast in full screen by pushing the icon on the right bottom corner of the screen. This session is being recorded as well. Also, please feel free to use the chat box on the right. It's a private chat box to send us any questions you might have, and that is popping up. And we will gladly respond to all the questions asked at the end of the presentations. So I would say, without further ado, Manuel and Simon, welcome. The stage is yours.
Perfect. Thank you. And Simon, if it's okay for you, I take the first part.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I skipped the slide for the speakers a little bit, as Thierry introduced us already. My name is Manuel Neukum. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at EvidentIQ, software engineer by background, but working for the clinical trial industry over 10 years already. So I'm passionate here. And with me is my colleague, Simon Taylor, Director of Solution Consulting at EvidentIQ, already working quite a long time already also in the e-technology part. I'm glad that he is with me, and he will show you the product in detail. But before we come to that point, let's go to the market perspective on eConsent. And eConsent has been already out there and the increased demand prior even to COVID, right? So what you see here on that slide, there's a survey done in 2019 where the participants have been asked for what do they think, when or how much will eConsent be used in their trials. And as you can see, in 2019, they still said, like, it's still a new thing for us in terms of implementation, but they are expected in the next 1 to 3 years already to be at a half, and then beyond 3 years, even 3/4 in their trials. And that, of course, has been boosted by the Corona pandemic as well, right? So there is definitely a boost in that one, but it was a topic before. But we have also another look on what we expect as EvidentIQ is also going to happen, or what is already going on. So we expect that not all of those trials, what you can see, will run a 100% virtually eConsent process, like the ICF process that we are all used to will be gone. We expect a more hybrid setup. So that is due to how you can roll it out. That might be due a geographical stretch, due to various reasons. And there has been even released this year in March by the European CRO Federation, an article or an implementation guideline, I would call it, where they also speak quite a lot about remote and on-site, and how you should mix it up and make it in terms of implementation, not in terms of a technical product implementation, but in terms of using it during your trial in a hybrid way. And we think that is really what will be, if you think like it's a 3/4 of a trial will use eConsent, it will be most of them will be a hybrid mode. And being known or being in the industry for a couple of years already, we know, especially our CRO customers, for example, they also like to deploy the tooling without a vendor support. So they want to be able to steer content and grant permissions on the different versions of the consent form and so on their own. So this is what we of course expect as well for eConsent solutions. And there's also increasing requirements. I mean, GDPR, it's an old topic already, right? But it has been disruptive over the years. And it was just an example on how those topics can make requirements increase in our industry. And we expected more, right? Because eConsent, where it's used at the moment, it's like where, for example, the therapeutic area has been a very good match, but it will be also implemented in more, I would call it more difficult setups. Think about oncology studies and stuff like that, where you have to deal with a more complex scenario, and that also brings us increased requirements for the eConsent solutions. So, but when you think about back on what is actually the problem on paper ICFs, so why, if there's an increase in complexity, why don't we just stay with what we have, despite, of course, the increased interest in decentralized trials and virtual components in our industry? We have the problem that the complexity, as we all know from studies, also has increased. The protocols are getting more complex. You combine different phases and so on. And this complexity translates also, of course, in the complexity to the ICFs, right? It's harder now to understand what actually the patient is going to sign. And paper ICFs, they, of course, need to attend very specific and very exact, to be honest, but that also lacks then in sometimes a lack of understanding what this is going on. And this is where we see eConsent might not always replace paper ICFs, but will enrich and enhance the process on what is going on. So if we think about in numbers, we're taking it from a study, so 20% of eligible studies actually cannot be enrolled due to the lack of understanding of the ICFs at the moment. And if you think 20%, that is quite a high number. If you think about patient recruitment is a critical component of running a successful trial. 20%, if you can get some decrease of this 20% into enrollment, everybody would be happy, right? So I think this is especially a point in time where eConsent can support this overall process. Another number is 5% in a dropout due to misunderstanding of the expectations, and 5% is a lower number. But if you think of how much you invest into a patient already and how much it actually hurts in the process, every dropout, right? That is of course a number you really want to reduce to a minimum. So coming back to the complexity, just another perspective on that one. And sorry that we picked an American study, but that was a very interesting one. So the average reading level actually of an American adult, and it's similar to Europeans, but we didn't find a study for that one, is on a 5th grade level. If you compare it to the complexity on the ICF, where it's roughly about a 10th grade level of what the material is written for, what you would need to know, there's certainly a gap, which explains almost, or explains the trend where the 20% are coming from. So again, the use of media, I would say, use of video, pictures, and the other nice things which we have implemented into the EvidentIQ eConsent solution, which Simon will bring you into a minute, helps, of course, for better participation and understanding of the patients. And then there's one thing, user interface matters to participants. I have to admit I'm a little bit old school in terms of when I read a book. Actually, I really like to have the book in my hands, sit in a corner if my family allows me to have that spare time, and just have also a little bit of touch on that one. Nothing against e-readers, but they're a little bit old school or romantic, if you want to say. But in terms of an e-consent or in terms of a paper consent form, what I don't like is having a bunch of paper which I have to go through and have to sign all day long, right? So there, of course, we are used to have better interfaces, very nice interfaces, where you get a guidance through the process, through the flow, and that helps you really to finish the process with your patients. Yeah, so better understanding of the participants. So what are the benefits actually for the participants and for all of us? It's increased adherence. I think that makes sense, right? And adherence is there also always a big topic. We have touched also the dropout rates, better comprehension indeed, and something what I also what is logical, right, is the improved long-term recall. So what do we mean by that? Actually, I'm also a very visual person, and I guess the majority of the people can remember better if it's visual. So if you can enrich with multimedia, that definitely helps with the long-term recall and what you actually have signed for. So, but what is in actually for the other players surrounding the patient? So on the one side, if you think about health authorities and the ethics, it's also a little bit of the increased transparency on what is going on, because you can at all point in time really see which version of an ICF, for example, were applied to which patient or to which participant, so that this increased transparency also leads, of course, then to fewer inspection findings. For the sites, that is this whole thing about going to a folder, maybe get out the wrong version of the paper version of it. So this whole administrative burden, which they still have to carry with the paper version, you can reduce. It's not gone, because you have still to use the newer tools, but you can reduce the burden. And which is very important, you can reduce the quality risks. For example, as you can make sure that you steer centrally which version is the current version the participants of the trial needs to sign. And which helps in the sites, which an ultimate goal for this process at least is to focus on the patients and their questions, what they have, what prevents them to enrolling into the study, right? Their concerns, and really being more focused on the patient needs here. For the sponsors zeros, and also on a highlight, of course, for us as EvidentIQ drives also decentralized trials and hybrid trials. That is, of course, a very necessary component for especially those trial setups. It improves efficiencies, right? Less sending around different kind of versions. I mean, the administrative burden, of course, brings in more efficiencies. More patient retention and compliance, we touched that point, and also continuous improvement of content. If you think about changing in protocols and bringing in what has changed into such a process, it can be just prepared on a very high level. And then, of course, ultimately reduction of trial costs and faster time to market. Reduction of trial costs, because the one we have is a quite cost-effective solution, and also this whole burden which you reduce on the side, of course, has a cost implication. But enough about the dry benefits and a market perspective. I would love to hand over to my colleague Simon, which will show you actually also the product. So Simon, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. And again, welcome everybody. As has been said before, my name's Simon Taylor, and I'm the Director of Solution Consulting, which is a fancy way of saying I sit between product and commercial, with eConsent really being myself and Manuel's baby. I'm going to show you a demo in a second after a couple of slides, because there's one or two things I really want to speak about, because I know in today's world, it's very, very important. The first of those is compliance. It still needs to be said out loud. Everything we do is compliant. Compliance is at the heart of everything we do, whether it's QA internally or making sure that data is protected, particularly when we're looking at patients and particularly when we're thinking about patients. Privacy, confidentiality, and security is one of the most, if not the most important consideration we need to have when looking at trial subjects and patients. Everything we do is GDPR compliant. Everything we do is 21 CFR Part 11 and EU Annex 11 compliant, as well as HIPAA compliant. One of the points of our eConsent is a video conferencing solution, which of course, again, fits within all of those regulations as well. So before all of that comes on, I just want to make sure that that's said, because it's a common question that we get in the modern world, because people, particularly that come from Zoom and Teams, which the basic versions are generally unsecure when it comes to 21 CFR Part 11 and Annex 11, we sit on the opposite spectrum in terms of being fully compliant. There's a lot of information on this slide and a few just different things I want to speak about before we do the demo. The first is the eConsultation. The eConsultation is built in within the module itself. It doesn't have to be taken necessarily. It can be taken as a module just to inform. We're well aware, and something Manuel raised a great point about, is that the way the world is at the moment, not every agency, not every country is able to take electronic informed consent forms, and we're very aware of that. We want to make sure we support the hybrid approach. So when we're supporting hybrid approach, the tool can just be used for education to make sure that people have those electronic copies, they can see everything, and they can refer back to it at every time, as Manuel said, without having to go home with a load of flyers or have a load of documentation about a trial at their bedside. So it can be used within or without, but the whole point is within that is to meet them where they are, whatever their device, whatever they want to use, whatever state they're in, or whatever they need to have a third party like a carer or a guardian, they can also be there too. Everything we do, of course, is unique to us within the study itself. We want to include this as part of our e-enrollment solution and to fit within the broader world of e-enrollment. We have a patient community of over 500,000 members now, which are able to integrate directly into the eConsent platform, so they can be used as a starting point. They're based in Europe and the US across a range of therapeutic areas. It's a community we can call upon and really make sure that we recruit as quickly as possible. The next stage of that is, of course, to make sure that they're inputted and they're created automatically within the EDC. So people doing data entry, physicians, investigators, doctors, site staff don't necessarily need to be creating new subjects within an EDC system or within the technology at site. It can be done automatically, which is a real time saver when it comes to it. You have full control of everything that you do. Compliance is at the heart of everything. We have a fully 21 CFR Part 11 e-signature as well, compliant e-signature, and we can support, as Manuel said, multimedia. So any types of multimedia, really, videos, PDFs, and PowerPoint. And the last thing to say is that it's fully browser-based. It works with any device because everything we do is on the browser, which is very, very important. So with that, I'm going to stop talking to slides, and I'm going to start sharing my screen to show you the eConsent platform itself. Just for the sake of the call, Thierry or Manuel, can you tell me if you could see my screen, please?
Yes, I see it perfectly.
Perfect. I know it's the biggest cliche in the world at the moment to ask if you can see my screen, but I have to just in case I start talking and you have no clue what I'm on about. I'm acting as a patient in this capacity. So I'm acting as a subject within the trial, and I've logged onto the site itself. How the patient is sent the link, it's a unique link that can be sent to the patient, is up to you how you do your enrollment, whether you come from our Carenity platform or it's a link that you send to them separately. Everything is then built and everything is configured towards your study. So everything you see at the moment fits within the EvidentIQ branding and the logos, the colors, the pictures, the text, etc. Everything for this enrollment and the eConsent solution is configurable to your clinical study. The patient is able to read through a little welcome message to make sure they're fully involved and they're fully understanding of the process that they're about to go through before we start that enrollment. The first stage and the first section that we come to is eligibility questions. Eligibility questions is something that can be asked and is often asked at different points of the trial. Very often it's included just in the EDC, but it is actually something that can be done further up the chain. It's an easier way to be able to figure out whether someone is eligible or ineligible for a study without them necessarily having to go directly then to the site to then find out that they're ineligible for the study. It very often can be easier to do it further up the chain before they give their consent so that it's not wasting anybody's time. And it's one of the simple but very obvious benefits of having a remote and electronic solution. Any questions are able to be answered. I'm within the age range. This is a blood pressure study that I'm running, and I've been told that I have high blood pressure. I've never taken blood pressure medication. I don't live in residential care. Those are all answers that will make me eligible for this trial. If any of these answers had been inputted incorrectly, the system will tell you, and it will take you to a page which says, thank you for your time, you're not eligible. And that's the end of the process for that patient. It's very quick, it's very straightforward. And as I mentioned, it's really important that it's not wasting anyone's time. No one's going to site that then you find out is ineligible, and that patient isn't wasting their time travel or going through a process that they may not have been eligible for, even though people may have thought they were earlier on. The next screen is one of the most important things we have within the system. As Manuel mentioned earlier, the multimedia aspect is incredibly important within the eConsent to inform patients and to make sure they're educated and they're understanding of what they're about to go through. The most important thing is that they can see all of this. They can view it, they can read it, they can refer back to it at any point. They have the ability to go see it, they can save it, they can do whatever they need to do to make sure that they feel informed and educated. And you, as a sponsor, as site staff, as anybody involved in the trial, can upload any type of information, so any multimedia can be supported within here. This is a particular video that we created for this, and we got this created using our fictitious drug, Evidentan. And it's a great way, video, as Manuel mentioned, lots of people are visual learners. It's a great way to get that understanding of what you're doing, particularly if someone is a poor reader. Video is often the simplest message. Or if someone is unwell, they may retain video better than they do a PDF or a PowerPoint. To that point, of course, we can go through and we can scroll through other information or more important information. Things like side effects, any type of documentation that needs to be shared can be shared, and it's important that it is shared. The whole point is to make sure that by the time the patient gets to signing the informed consent form, as we know, they feel informed. They have to feel informed. They have to feel educated so that they understand what the potentials of what they're about to go through, particularly when it comes to side effects, and just in general, the process of what they're about to. Patients can be nervous. Patients' carers can be nervous, or their relatives or their friends and family. And when they have a better understanding of what they're about to go through, they're much more comfortable with the process itself. And as I mentioned, that doesn't just mean side effects. As long as they know the treatments they're getting, they can look them up themselves. They can maybe do some research and they can see physically what may happen to them. If they're getting a blood draw, how do they deal with that? If there's someone that might be nervous about getting their blood taken, they can read, they can watch a video that might help them learn some strategies to help them deal with it better. Because as Manuel said, when people don't understand studies, they don't necessarily participate. And that may not mean that they can't read. It may just mean that they're worried and they're nervous and they're anxious. And because of that, they don't go through to the next stage. So all of these things we can mitigate with an electronic system. And it's much, much easier to mitigate with an electronic system than it is with a paper system. I need to go in and quickly switch off my video because I'm about to go into the eConsent platform and go on a video call. So excuse me for that. But from here, I have the ability now to go towards our consultation stage. And the consultation stage is one of two areas. It's either the ability to call the healthcare professional now or the doctor now, or to schedule a call for another time. If I want to schedule a call for another time, which is probably the most common way, I can go through, I can put in my name, my email address, and the system will send me an email and send me a calendar invite with all the details we need, with all the information we need to be able to dial in at the right point. Of course, with this, I'm going to call a HCP now. The system can also be configured to capture other information if you need as well. So if there's other personal information or any type of information that needs to be captured for the informed consent process, we can do that too. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to call my HCP now. We run a very quick test just to make sure that the technology works. You're on a browser, you're on the internet, you have a camera and a video, and I'm going to join that call. What you're then going to see is two versions of me, and I apologize for that. You can see that we have Simon as the patient in the bottom right-hand side, and the big version of Simon is me as the doctor, which happens to be my second laptop. It's easier to do a demo that way. The way we can see this is the patient, as you can see on the screen, has very little information they can see at the moment. The doctor has a much broader view. The doctor has a much better view where they can see much more insights and much more information. The doctor has the ability, or the professional has the ability, to share lots of relevant information or additional relevant information with the subject if they need to. So if there's any other leaflets, any other videos, any other PowerPoints or PDFs that they want to share, they can do. If a patient has come in and said, I read the form earlier and I'm worried about dizziness that was mentioned, that's okay. That's something we can deal with. A leaflet can be shared. As sponsors or CRO, you can share some of your marketing materials or your med affairs materials with them to, again, make sure that patient is comfortable. Again, any type of multimedia can be supported. So whether we're looking at PDFs, PowerPoints, videos, etc., it all has the ability to be shared. Of course, one of the most important things, or the most important thing when it comes to informed consent and eConsent itself, is the consent form itself. So we have the ability, and the doctor has the ability to actually share the informed consent form. So from here, they can share the correct version, at the correct time, from the correct site, can be shared with the patient. As you can see, as the patient, I can go through and I can read this. Of course, it can be sent earlier on. Within the about and within the media section, we can always make sure that the informed consent form is there as well, so that they can read it in advance, so that when they come to do or to sign it with a doctor, if they're in a region that allows to sign online, they have the ability to do so. They can scroll through, and with any fillable field, with any bit of data that you want to capture, I can go through and I can complete my informed consent. From here, I can go through, I can my email, I can give my consent to take part in the research, and I have my signature. Whatever that might be, whatever the signature is, usually likely to be on a tablet, so it's much better to do with a finger, and I can submit that form. Once I've submitted that, the doctor is notified, and the doctor has the ability to countersign it to make sure it's stored securely. It can be put within the site file to make sure the doctors have that personal record. And when I end the call, as a patient, as you can see here, I have the ability to download it. So I can have my local copy, my own copy, my actual copy of the informed consent form saved with me, and I can make sure that I have that within my system. So everything is in one place. We've gone through, it's a relatively, in a short space of time, gone through quite a lot when we've gone through eligibility questions, right through to multimedia, the consultation itself, and then being able to do the informed consent form. It's important to remember that any informed consent form from any site, any version can be uploaded, and we can keep track of any fillable field. It's not just the version that you saw. Whatever your site's informed consent form or whatever your study's informed consent form is, we can track that as well. So any type of information is completely flexible to include within this. One last thing that I want to show you is I just want to show you the doctor's view. So the doctor at the end or at the start has a much broader view of what they're looking at. They have the ability to be able to see the answers to the eligibility questions, if there was any blood pressure readings or any other medical history, as well as documents that may have been viewed. And from here, of course, they can also share the forms, share the documents, share the media, giving them much more control and much more insights into the patient, and making it easy for that person, making it easy for that practitioner to have a good informed consent form, an efficient informed consent form, where the patient comes out, they feel confident, they feel educated, and we have all of the legal requirements as well. A couple of other things to mention. One in particular is to invite an attendee. Obviously, within the world that it is at the moment, it may not just be one person signing. We may need a third party on board to make sure that everything has been done correctly, particularly if that patient is not of the capacity to sign themselves, so whether they're a minor or whether they're too sick. If they need someone that actually acts as a carer or a guardian, they can be invited to witness the process as well. The doctor can actually see the fields being filled out at any one time to make sure that they're fully witnessing the process that's going on. And as I mentioned, all that media can be shared from here. And the sponsor CRO side, all of that can be given. So it's straight at the doctor's fingertips. They don't have to do anything else but log in, and they can see all of it. They can also make sure, and they can see the forms that are here, and make sure that, or we can make sure and get rid of those errors to show that the correct form, the correct version from the correct site is being shown at the correct time, to make sure we reduce the number of errors, reduce the monitoring burden. We can monitor remotely for a start using this as well, and everything is all in one place. So it's much more efficient. We can get the record of all of this done. And as I mentioned, we can then start putting this into downstream systems when we think of things like EDC, when we think of things like CTMS. When we automate that, we can automate billing to a patient from, or payments to a patient from a CTMS. We can automate putting them into the EDC. We can automate randomizing that patient within the EDC without ever having to actually create them physically. So getting rid of the manual creation process, which is something that we hear from sites that is something that can get in the way of doing it. It's one of those small extra steps that they have to do very, very regularly. And lots of that data is captured somewhere else. If you're capturing the data of the informed consent form, We know when that is from the system. We've got a fully compliant e-signature that tracks it. We have a system that tracks it. We have a document that tracks it. There's no reason that a system can't be inputting that automatically. To put it within your clinical ecosystem and just making sure that we're putting in as many efficiencies into the process as possible. I've spoken a lot within the last 15 minutes. That's actually quite a lot of information, even though the time hasn't necessarily gone too far. I've spoken about a lot of things. What I'm now going to do is, I think I'm going to hand back to Thierry to do some question and answers. I know we had a couple that have come in. So I think the best things to do is to do that instead of diving too deeply. And I hope you enjoyed the demonstration, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. That was brilliant, actually. Yeah, we have indeed some questions that come from the audience. So yeah, we have some of them. So let me pick the first one here. It's what do you do for countries that don't accept electronic consent? Can you support a hybrid e-consent management?
Yes, absolutely. I'll take the manual. Sorry. Absolutely. You don't have to use it for consent itself. Being able to just use it for the educational part is a huge, as Manuel mentioned, it's a huge leap anyway. Uploading the educational materials, being able to refer back to those educational materials is so much easier for the patient, even if you're not using the consent part. So it's not necessarily something that's that's mandatory. You can use it if you want. And of course, until every agency and every EC accepts electronic consent, we're probably always going to have hybrids. So, we can do that. That's absolutely fine. It can be captured manually and make sure that it's still recorded in the system without a problem.
Okay. So another one is what would be the requirements for non-interventional studies? I believe what you are showing is for interventional trials.
Yeah, maybe Simon, I can take that one. So basically, you're right, Helena. That is actually for the interventional trials. Was that like the full blown flow we have at the moment? All of the steps you have seen, like the eligibility step, or even the medical consultation step, which is like the prime of the solution, right? Is the most interesting topic for interventional ones. That is everything you can switch off, right? For non-interventional studies, in my opinion, it is quite enough, depending on where you get the resources from, to continue just with enrichment with the media and all those kind of things. So you don't need, for example, the consultation part.
Okay, thank you, Manuel. So another one is, don't we need to submit changes in the consent to the ECs?
Of course. Yeah, I'll take this one. Absolutely. We don't get in the way of that process. That still needs to be submitted. It still needs to be approved. The benefit is the efficiency of putting it into a system once it's been approved. So instead of manually having to make sure that your site has a copy of the updated documents or the updated consent form or reconsent, it can be shared automatically into the system, saving you a lot of time, a lot of FedEx, a lot of cost, because it can be done instantly once those changes are done and are approved.
Okay, so we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions actually. So how do you manage someone witnessing consent for a vulnerable patient?
Just because I showed that, shall I take that, Manuel?
Sure.
I'll keep going. We always wanted to make sure that someone else can be invited. So whether everyone is sat around the hospital bed as they make do with doctor and patient, they don't need to be on separate devices for a start. You can just have it there. Again, we don't have to have the video call as part of it. But it's the era of COVID at the moment. If you need to have a carer or a guardian separately, we want to make sure they're included. We invite them in. The process is exactly the same for them getting the invite. It's easy for them to get in, to making sure that those patients basically are informed properly and their consent is documented correctly, which is vulnerable patients, for children, the very sick, to make sure that everyone that needs to be in the room or the virtual room is in there at the right time.
Okay. Thank you for this. So next one is, are these conversations recorded? Do they have an audit trail?
Should I take that one, Simon?
Yeah, you go.
Yeah, the conversations itself, they are not recorded, but there are log files for what is the conversation and when did it started and things like that. So there is an audit log, but of course no recording per default. Okay.
I think the other one is also for you, Manuel. What experience do you have using eConsent solutions in Germany? Is remote eConsent possible? And what are the current restrictions? Example is the e-signature.
Yeah, I mean, for the e-signature in Germany, as it does for other European countries, it's the EIDAS regulation, right? The e-signature regulation, where you have three different steps in terms of, I would call it, quality of the e-signature. So you have the normal electronic signature, which you would similar to the process what we have, for example, for the 21 CFR compliance on the FDA, right? So it's just you have to make sure that you know who's the person is a controlled environment, and then you have more restricted signature requirements, but they go more into the direction in Germany if you want to be a notary and if you want to buy a house and things like that, right? So there you have to take more measures. But in general, for e-signatures, the EIDAS regulation, where we are compliant on that level. And experience in eConsent solutions in Germany. Germany is not well represented in where the eConsent is in use. Of course, quite larger market is the North American market, for example. But Germany is growing there as well. What we see in terms of experience is that it's more again a mixed mode, right? So it's less that you only rely on eConsent as the only way. It's more using the enrichment of additional functionality and media on top of the ICS process. So that's what we see in Germany.
Okay. Is there not a requirement for investigators to also sign the consent?
Yep, and there is, absolutely. The investigator can countersigns on the other side.
Okay. You didn't show that, Simon. That's a good one, Helen.
Yeah, I didn't show that, but yes, they can, of course.
So I think we still have 3 to go. So what other integrations make sense with eConsent?
Actually, quite a lot. It's one of those systems that connects to a lot more things the more you think about it. Consent, the patient sort of sits centrally to everything. So when you're looking at technology, it's the obvious things are things like EDC, because the patient will be created automatically afterwards. But as we mentioned earlier, things like the CTMS is a lot more useful than I think people may have thought previously, particularly if you're paying patients and paying subjects for travel, their time, etc. Having them automatically created, scheduled, etc. Putting them into that billing run instantly and automatically is a big time saver and efficiency saver. There's also a lot further up the stream. Most companies spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money recruiting patients, and sites spend a lot of time, effort, and money recruiting patients, and they use systems for that. So they have the big bank of recruitment systems. They have the patients recruited from somewhere, and then there's a bit of a black hole before they get to the point of eConsent. And actually, you can connect the two together to make it more seamless. So it's one thing we've been exploring a lot of, and we see a lot in the market, where there's a lot of efficiency that comes from that may not have been thought of before. Manuel, is there anything I've missed there that you wanted to add?
No, I think that's great.
Well, I think we have one last one. It stopped. So we had a lot of questions actually. So here is the last one for today. Is what about populations with poor technology access, like in a hospital bed or in the community?
Yeah, we want to make it as easy as possible for them to be able to do this. So if they are in a hospital bed and vulnerable, they can use the technology that's there. Most places will use some sort of technology to get in. We're working with companies at the moment, or with community outreach programs that use tablets and go into the community to be able to recruit patients and make sure that they're included. So particularly with underrepresented populations. So they can use a tablet to go out into the community that may not have ever happened before. And we can actually use that for the consent as well. So whilst, of course, there's a need for some technology because it's electronic, the barrier for using that technology is very, very low. So as long as there's some form of electronic system somewhere, we can get those patients involved a lot more easily than used to happen.
Okay. Well, bad news. It's not the last question.
No. That's
okay,
good.
So we have another one that just came in. Is have the patients the possibility to retire their eConsent at any moment for some countries? For instance, in Canada, there are English and French speakers as well. Is it possible to modulate the language of eConsent in real time? So that's actually 2 questions in one.
Yeah, I can take the last one, Simon, for you, that you have some time to brief. So for the multi-language functionality, yes, as it's a browser-based tooling, right? It's a web-based tooling. It always goes with the language of your browser. So basically, if you're in Canada and you have a French speaker, I guess they are set up their browsers that it's in French. And if you change it around, the translation is done automatically. So that is then, I would say, what you ask for in real time, right? And the possibility to withdraw the eConsent, yes, there's a possibility. The trigger, although I have to say, is outside of the module what you have seen, right? That gets triggered, for example, out of the EDC process, where you have the patient then registered. It follows, all of the data entry, and from there, then you trigger the withdrawn of the consent as well.
Okay. Thank you for this, Manuel. So I'm looking at my screen. I think we have done all the questions. So I think we are getting to the end of this. So yeah, I would say that's it. Thank you all for attending. And if you want any more insights or in-depth details on our Evidentix eConsent solution, yeah, feel free to get in contact with us, and we'll please to kind of host you and answer any questions or more detailed questions that you might have about this. So thank you, Manuel and Simon, again. And thank you all for attending. With further ado, I would say have a great rest of your day, and thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.